The American squadron slowly moves into the channel of the mouth of the bay. Dewey was confident that the stealth approach of his fleet would surprise the Spanish, but soon this thought was short-lived, as the Elfride Island began firing at his ships. On the other hand, Montojo hears the skirmish that was happening and sounded the alarm, as it was going to be a long morning for many. Welcome to my channel, and this is the Battle of Manila Bay. From 1896 to 1898, George Dewey, or shall I say Commodore George Dewey, was appointed commander of the Asiatic Squadron. With the help of his friend, Assistant Secretary of the Navy Theodore Roosevelt, who was preparing the Navy for war readiness during the time John Davis Long, Secretary of the Navy, was taking a day off, and when he returned, he countermanded some of the orders Roosevelt issued, those Dewey still remained as the commander of the squadron. January 1898 to February 1898, Dewey sailed from Nagasaki, Japan to Hong Kong to inspect his squadron. He also received reports of the USS Maine incident, but was doubtful of the war with Spain. However, he was still confident in destroying the Spanish force in the Philippines. From February 1898 to April 1898, Dewey began sending agents conducting secret missions to gather intelligence reports on the Philippines and Spanish squadron. From these reports he was informed of the opposing forces' state and the mindset of Spanish planted on the bay. Dewey also resolved the problems faced by the squadron from having a lack of enough ammunition by having the USS Concord, which was being refitted as reinforcement to the US force, to carry a portion of the needed ammunition. He also ordered the Concord to stop at Honolulu to supply the USS Baltimore, as it was still being as it will also be a reinforcing part on the squadron. On the other hand, he also purchased extra supplies from Japan in a total amount of ammunition until the battle was only 60% of the needed supply. Patricio Montojo became Rear Admiral and served as the General Commander of Spanish naval forces against the Filipino revolutionaries. On March 15, 1898, Montojo expressed his concerns to the Captain General Basilio Agustin that the American squadron present in Hong Kong would destroy the Spanish fleet. Montojo also tried asking for more supplies from space, but it never arrived. The Spanish also at this time prepared their defenses. They fortified several naval guns and placed them at critical locations. Others were placed on the post fortifications of Manila, Sandy Point, and at Isla Grande Battery at Subic Bay. Some of the guns came from the Spanish squadron itself. The overhaul de Velasco has its 4.7-inch guns removed and placed at Caballo Island, as well as the General Lazo gunboat, whose 4.7-inch guns were placed at Elfride Island, while the Don Antonio del Ulua has its port sides removed and placed at Sandy Point. The entrance to the Subic Bay and Manila Bay were mined, and some vessels were properly sunk in the eastern entrance of Subic Bay, though the amount of mines were inadequate and disassembled. On April 25, 1898, Admiral Patricio Mato took the whole squadron, leaving the Uluwat Samanagmay from Manila to Subic Bay. The Castilla, one of the oldest ships at his squadron, had a leak from the bearings on its propellers and was filled with cement, making her unpowered, so she was towed by a transport called the Manila. The plan of Montojo was to use the Isla Grande battery in Subic Bay together with the squadron to attack the Americans. But when he arrived at the bay, the 5.9-inch guns were not installed and the mine set were unreliable. From April 26 to 27, 1898, Dewey moved his squadron from Hong Kong to Mears Bay. During their stay, they received a gift, which were several lighters of coal from Hong Kong merchants, which was used by the fleet as they sailed toward the Philippines. From April 20 to 1898, Montojo was still not finished in preparing the Subic defenses when he learned that the Jewish force was heading towards the Philippines. Realizing that he was out of time, Montojo instead directed his squadron back towards Manila Bay, as the deeper waters of Subic Bay may cause the crews of the ship to drown if they were sunk during the battle. At first, he considered to use the anchorage of Manila as it was surrounded by many batteries and fortifications, as the place will hold things now, but this would lead to destruction of the city itself. Instead, he decided to use Kanakaw Bay near Sangkuli Point as they can support from the shore batteries and the shallow water would allow the Spanish ships to sink their top part will still remain above water and the crews are able to get ashore and rescue themselves. He also placed lighters filled with sand on the bow of the Castile to protect the wooden hull of the ship. On April 30, 1898, Dewey and the Asiatic squadron arrived in Luzon, and he would send the Boston and Concord to survey Subic Bay for any enemy forces. At first, he received reports of gunfire, so he set the Baltimore to check on the ships, though he would later be notified that no ships were located. Realizing that the Spanish squadron now is in Manila Bay, he hastily moved his ships towards Manila. Montoya, on the other hand, received reports of the Americans' activities in Subic Bay and are now heading to Manila. Before we begin the battle, let us first look at the ships and equipment used by both sides. First, the Americans. The, American, the American flagship was the USS Olympia. She was a protected cruiser commissioned in 1898, weighing at 5,870 tons. Her main armament consists of four 8-inch 35 cal Mark IV guns and 10 5-inch 45 cal Mark II guns. The USS Baltimore was also part of the fleet and was a protected cruiser commissioned in 1890, weighing at 4,600 tons. Her main armaments consist of the four 8-inch 35 cal Mark IV guns and six 6-inch 30 cal Mark III guns. The USS Raleigh was a Cincinnati-class protected cruiser commissioned in 1894, displays around 3,200 tons, with a main armament of one 6-inch 40 cal gun, supplemented by 10 5-inch 40 cal guns. The USS Boston, protected cruiser commissioned in 1887, displays 3,000 displays at 3,200 tons. Its main armament include two 8-inch 30 cal Mark I and six 6-inch 30 cal Mark II guns. The USS Concord, a Yorktown-class gunboat commissioned in 1891 with a displacement of 1,710 tons, with a main armament of six 6-inch 30 cal Mark III guns, while the USS Petrel, a 48 gunboat commissioned in 1889, is placed at 867 tons, with its main armament of four 6-inch 30 cal Mark III guns and secondary armament of two 3-pounders and one 1-pounder naval gun. Now, Dewey's Asiatic squadron also brought three transport ships, two of which, the USS Nanchon and the USS Zafiro, were purchased by him, while the USS Hugh McCulloch was borrowed from the Coast Guard back at the US state. As for the Spanish, their capital ship was the Reina Cristina, which was an Alfonso the 12 class unprotected cruiser, displaced at 3,042 tons, and was launched in 1887. Its main armament consists of six Gonzales Hontaria de 6-inch 35 cal Mod 1883. They also had the Castilla, an Aragon-class unprotected cruiser commissioned in 1882, displacing at 3,289 tons, with its main armaments of 5.9-inch SKL 35 cal guns. They also have three Velasco-class unprotected cruisers, with the leading Velasco, the Don Antonio de Loa, and the Don Juan de Estrella. All displaced at 1,152 tons. The Uluwa and Austria were completed in 1889, while the Velasco was launched in 1881. 1881. The main armament of the two ships, the Loa and Estrella, consists of four Gonzales Antonio de 4.7-inch 35 Mod 1883, while the Velasco consists of BL 6-inch Mark II guns. Though the Velasco was in the battle, all of its machinery was stripped from it, together with its gun, making it a floating hulk. On the other hand, the the Ulua had two of its guns removed from it and placed at the Caballo battery. They also have two small protected cruisers known as the Isla de Luzon and Isla de Cuba, which were commissioned in 1887 and displaced around 1,000 guns. Their main armament consists of the six Gonzales Onteria de 4.7-inch 35 cal 18 Mod 1883. Though they were considered as protected cruisers, their small size also considered them as gunboats. One of the cited gunboats One of the cited gunboats in the battle was the Marquess del Nurel, which was a Fernando El Catolico class third-class gunboat commissioned in 1875, displaced at 492 tons, with the main armament of a rifled muzzle loading gun and secondary armament of smoke guns, which were pretty much old at this era. Note that there were additional 23 gunboats, but they didn't engage in the battle. At the equipment mainly the main armaments used by both sides in the battle. As you can see, the heaviest guns both sides handed included the 8-inch 35 cal twin mount from the USS Olympia, which could reach around 6,000 yards at 20 degrees, while the 8-inch 30 cal from the USS Boston can reach around 14,000 yards at 20 degrees. Though I have a 14 centimeter Mod 1883 displays here on the right, it's a wrong representation because I really didn't find a picture for the 67 centimeter variation. Though as you can see, the 16 centimeter variation reached only around 10,000 yards at 17.5 degrees, while also the 15 centimeter SKL 35, which was a German made guns on the Castilla, reached only 10,936 yards, which you can see both guns were out of range and both guns were underpowered compared to the Americans. The Americans used also three quick-firing naval guns, specifically the 6-inch 30 cal, the 6-inch 40 cal, even though only one existed during the battle since it was located at the USS Raleigh, and the 5-inch 40 cal naval gun, which reached around 16,000 to 18,000 yards. On the other hand, the most used during the battle by the Spanish was the quick-firing gun of the 12 centimeter Mod 1883, but like its other variants, it can only reach around 10,936 yards. The Gonzalo Contoria, the 16 centimeter, 14 centimeter, and 12 centimeter variants were known for being slow and cumbersome and weren't really modded for the modern times. On the other hand, the Marquis del Nuro had a rifle muzzleloader, which was already a outdated gun at that time and which pretty much underpowered. Now after this, we can proceed to the main battle. There were two channel passes at the mouth of Manila Bay. We have the northern channel between the Bataan Peninsula and Coronador Island, and the southern channel between Caballo Island and El Fraile Island. Though both of the channels were mined, Dewey reassured his crews that these mines were already deteriorating and ineffective. Though the mines were present, no damage or harm were put upon by these mines on the American ships. At 12 o'clock p.m., the Asiatic Squadron approached the southern channel and passing Alpine Island, with Olympia on the lead of the whole squadron. At this point, Maculo's funnels started spouting fire due to the fact that the soot at the funnels caught on fire. This caused the Alfredi's garrison to fire upon the Asiatic Squadron. On the other hand, the Asiatic Squadron would return counter-fire, which will ultimately silence the small Spanish battery. On the other hand, Montojo will now receive reports of what was happening at El Fraile and alert his officers and men to ready themselves as the Americans approach them. On the other hand, Dewey approached the anchorage at Manila slowly at 4 knots, thinking that the whole American approach a stealth was a stealth mission, though the Spanish were already knew that they were coming. As Dewey didn't find the Spanish forces at Manila, he would send the Maculo, Lancha, and Zafiro towards a safe spot in Manila Bay to avoid them getting hit. On the other hand, Dewey will lead his remaining forces towards Cavite City at Canacao Bay. At 5:05 a.m., as the American ships passed Manila, 3 shore batteries began firing at them. Though these were ineffective, the Boston and Raleigh countered fire, yet they only fired once since they wanted to use the ammunition against the Spanish ships. At 5:15 a.m., we can see the positions that the Spanish forces were. From left to right, we have the Estrella, the Ilaloa, the Castilla, the Cuba, Cristina, the Luzon, and the Nuero, with Velasco in the rear, though it was already an empty hull. As the Estrella crew sees the approaching Americans, Montojo will order the whole Spanish squadron, as well as the forts at Sangley Point and at Cavite to fire at them. Though this was ineffective, as all the shells fell short of their targets. On the other hand, Dewey will lead his forces in passing the Spanish uh, forces at their front, with Olympia on the lead, Baltimore, then Petrel, Raleigh, Concord, and Boston, which at this moment they fire and dispatch positions. As the American squadron was going for another run, the Spanish forces countered fire, but most of their shots missed, and Dewey will return again for 5 times. In the 5th pass, he would gain a distance from the Spanish positions at 2,000 yards from his own ships, which would be the closest ever the Americans were positioned towards the Spanish. At this position, they will fire at the Spanish ships again. But at this point, after 5 passes, the whole Spanish fleet was already damaged, some of the ships were already burning, and they were very desperate. At this point, the Estrella tried to ram the Olympia from the front, but she became a center fire from the American ships and was completely riddled with American shells and causing her to retreat. The Christina also tried the same tactic by attacking Olympia, but she was also fired upon. Yet, unfortunately, unlike Australia, she was riddled with so much bullets, her propulsion and steering system were completely destroyed, causing her and her starboard magazines to blow up, causing fire on her deck. Though some of the crew were still firing at the American forces, it was utterly useless. Patricio Montauk, seeing that his flagship was already going to sink at any time, ordered an abandoned ship. The Cuba and Luzon came close to the stricken flagship to help in its evacuation. At 6:30 a.m., a shot from the American forces causes the Castilla to have one of its anchored cables cut, causing it to drift and exposing its unprotected side. After a few shots from the American forces, this would ultimately cause her to have a fire on deck and causing her to sink immediately. The Austria, seeing that the crew were already abandoning the Castilla, went together, went beside the ship and helped in its evacuation. At 7:30 a.m., Dewey prepared for another pass at the Spanish position, but at this time he would receive the report that the 5-inch guns at the Olympia were already low in ammo with 15 shells per gun, which makes him to conclude that also other guns at his ships were also low in ammo. But he didn't want to demoralize his men that saying that they were retreating, so he said that all of Americans and Spanish were taking a breakfast break. As the Christina sank, the Dewey's forces began retreating back towards their support ships. On the other hand, Patricio Montojo at the less damaged Cuba assessed the damage of his forces. The Ulua, after being hit many times, has capsized and was already sinking. The Castilla, after burning for a lot of time, has already been sunk, though the Australia was successful enough to evacuate the crew. The Marquez del Nuero, though at the end of the Spanish line, was also sunk, and the Velasco, which was defenseless, was also sunk. As for the Isla de Luzon, it had 3 of its guns destroyed, and Austria had its hull riddled with American shells, and also its steering was completely destroyed. Montojo, seeing the desperate situation of his squadron, began ordering 3 of his ships to retreat back to Bacoor Bay, which would lead all of the ships and all remaining ships to be scuttled. On the other hand, at 11:16 a.m., as Dewey realized that the error of the report sent to him, finally returned to the Spanish squadron quickly to assess the damage done by the Americans. This time, the Baltimore led at front, replacing the Olympia. As the American ships closed near Canaco Bay, they realized that they have effectively destroyed most of the Spanish ships. On the other hand, the fort at Sangley and Cavite still fired, though after a short counter-battery fire, even reports saying that the Olowa fired at them, all forces were quickly silenced. On the other hand, the Concord would sink a single transport ship at Canaco Bay, the Isla de Mindanao. The Petrel would close in near Cavite to fire at the government offices, which led at 12:30 a.m. the complete surrender of all Spanish forces. So what's the summary of the battle? Well, for the Americans, they have only 2 cruisers minor damage, the USS Baltimore, and from this minor damage, 9 men were wounded, and one died at the USS McCulloch of a heart attack. As for the Spanish, 77 were killed, 271 were wounded, 4 cruisers sunk, 3 cruisers scuttled, 1 gunboat scuttled, and 1 transport ship sunk, which was an ultimate and decisive defeat by the Americans on the Spanish. As for the men who led the battle, Dewey was promoted to Rear Admiral, and, and he was given a Heroes Parade, and a Medal of the U.S. Navy was also named after him. As for Patricio Montojo, as he returned to Madrid, he was court-martialed and imprisoned for his defeat at the Battle of Manila Bay, though he would ultimately be released as one of the testimonies that would ultimately let him free was from Dewey, who says that Montojo fought bravely and respected him as an adversary and as a ship captain. Anyway, that's the end of the video, guys. Hope you enjoy. Please share and like and subscribe as always, and wait for the next video.